So there's not a rush in making a final decision. The rush for us, for me, is that we need a direction, because the current issues, the current concerns that we've shared today are the concerns in our reality today. And so we do have large class sizes at grades 3 through 5, some that we can address by adding teachers to the buildings that kind of, unfortunately, we're taking away some, elective classrooms, and we're doing some things to shift around to reduce that burden of large class sizes, grades 3 through 5. But we do next year have an empty building that will take us a good year to plan appropriately. And without some direction on what happens to that Montfort campus right now, it's going to only delay what we need to do for a secondary campus or a middle school or whatever it is. Because it'll take us a good year, no matter what decision we make, to do something with that campus. The second part of that is, as we continue to talk about the needs of this district, as you saw, even as we try to address the out-of-district enrollment, which we are doing on the kindergarten end, we still have students in our buildings who need us in smaller class sizes and us to be able to serve them in an appropriate way. And so the direction that we need is, how do we do that appropriately? Do we and can we add teachers? Does that mean then that we cannot add preschools? If that's the case, we need to know that now so that we can move forward. We all agree in this room, and all we have been agreeing in this room and all across the district, that the way to address some of our learning gaps and some of our opportunities at the elementary level is that we need some preschool classrooms and some more opportunities for students who are struggling. That's not been a secret. But in order to do that, we need to make space somehow. And in order to do that, we need time to plan that out. So do we need to say right this second, option 4 is the only way to do that? Absolutely not. But do we need time to plan in 2016-17 to make something happen? We do. And so that's why we're here. We are here to go through the process from November to now and say, here are our challenges. Parking, transportation, student achievement, our alternative or non-traditional high school. We have basically 3 schedules running on a high school campus. For any of you that have ever been on a high school campus, that's pretty crazy. And if we have an opportunity to address that, we should. We also have an opportunity to address some of our middle school students in a large middle school who are not having their needs met. It is important that the leadership team, that the entire school community at least acknowledge that and then see if we can devise a plan to address it. At the same time, we have growth in West Asheville that's going to probably, in predictions, meet what we have right now. So if we make a plan, we need a plan that doesn't last 3 years or 4 years, that lasts for decades to accommodate that growth. Because our little babies in West Asheville are going to eventually be 5-year-olds. And when they are 5-year-olds, we're going to be real close to 5,000 children. And right now, with the current structure, we can't serve those students, not appropriately. And so we're here for help and direction and conversation about, here are our challenges, here's what we've done since November, here's what we know we can do, and here's where we feel we are falling short. We need your help.
Thank you.
So
I appreciate you saying that.
So I think we need more time. Is there any way that the Board of Education's final decision can be pushed back to early April?
Yes.
I think that there are portions, and we described this in our last meeting, there are portions of this decision that can be pushed to a later date. There are portions of this decision that we need to move forward on very soon for a number of reasons. One being, and I know you don't want to hear it, but one of them is budget. The other, though, is personnel. We want to be generous to our personnel in that if we need to make a change, they should be able to know now, not in May or June. I don't think that's fair to our personnel. It's not fair. If, for example, we're making some kind of shift or we need to transfer or add classrooms to other buildings to accommodate growth, that means moving teachers and teacher assistants and maybe other staff. We don't want to tell them in June. I don't think that's fair. And so if there's a direction that we need to move that will require us to move personnel, we should tell them soon. Because transfer notices, as the staff knows, comes out in March. And if we don't give an opportunity for you to be able to say, that's not my choice, this is, then we're doing a disservice to our employees. And that's just not right.
I just feel like the community thinks that this is rushed through, that we're not making real decision. And if there's any amount of time that could be given to us, it just seems like it makes sense.
I hear you, Will. And here's what I will say. And please believe me, give me some trust today. I don't have a dog in this fight except the children in Asheville City Schools. I know without a shadow of a doubt in my heart that we have got to serve preschool children in Asheville City Schools. That's my dog. It's really the only dog in this fight. If we can figure out how to do that and provide opportunities for 3- and 4-year-olds with very few barriers, none would be nice. Whatever we come up with after that, we'll work on together. But I don't believe, and it's a non-negotiable for me, and it is what it is, that we don't serve 3- and 4-year-olds as to the best of our ability, because that is the need in our district. Whatever else we come up with, I think we'll need to figure out together. I do also tell you that when I walk on that Asheville High School campus with SILSA and our AHA program, we have got to do something to address the needs of students that are going out into the workforce in a few years, that are going out to college in a few years. I won't put my head on a pillow and go to sleep knowing that we haven't done the best thing we can do for our 16, 15 to 19-year-old children. I just can't do it. And so if we can figure out a way to address those 3 campuses on that one campus, that will be wonderful for Asheville City Schools, because at the end of the day, I need to sign a diploma that says I certify this graduate. And I will not do that if I don't feel comfortable with it.
Good afternoon, everybody. I believe we are ready to get started. And first of all, we want to say a great big thank you for joining us this afternoon as we continue our information sharing and our discussion about the Asheville City Schools restructuring process and the restructuring initiatives. Now, from this moment on, if you hear the phrase school review team, that's you. You are now your school's review team, and you're going to be doing some work this afternoon. You're going to be doing some listening and then some work in response to the information that you're going to hear. On your tables, on a salmon-colored sheet of paper, is the agenda with time frames, and also a checklist that is going to come in handy as we proceed through this process and as we get to the end of our presentation, the work that you're going to be doing in your school review teams. So again, I say welcome. I am Cynthia Sellinger. I am the principal at Asheville Middle School, and this is my 33rd year in Asheville City Schools as... Who started that clapping? Was that my plant I put on the back row? Thank you, Kenny Nichols. I started teaching here in 1982, and yes, I know. One of the dinosaurs, the other one's behind me, and I'm going to let Sarah and David introduce themselves.
The dinosaur too, or
You're
not?
The second dinosaur.
I am Sarah Kane. I am the proud principal at Ira B. Jones Elementary School, and this is my 17th year in Asheville City Schools. I was a classroom teacher at Asheville Middle School. I've been an assistant principal and a principal, and it's my 21st year in education. I started my teaching career in Buncombe County at the alternative school.
My name is David Robinson. I'm the principal over at SILSA in Asheville High School. This is my 14th year in education. I taught for 8 years at Madison Middle School, 7th grade math, and then I moved to principal of Madison Early College for 5 years, and this is my first year at SILSA.
And we are the facilitation team. On February 17th, following the February 16th board work session, an email was sent to all Asheville City School stakeholders about the development for this school review team. And as I told you, you are your school's review team. And I'm going to read the mission of this team aloud to you. On February 16th, the board approved the creation of a school-based review team consisting of an administrator, the school improvement team chair, the PTO president or one co-president, and the teacher of the year from each of the 9 schools. The school review team can, if they desire, develop new options to propose, but any new proposal should meet the 7 key points referenced as published and must be submitted prior to February 29th. And actually, we've revised that to the end of working day on February 29th. And we will meet again on February 29th, and we'll be going over those 7 key points with you a little bit later in our presentation. In summary, the district school review team has the following roles and responsibilities. Number 1, to gain a more in-depth understanding of the process to date. Number 2, to bring the stakeholders at their respective schools up to date. Number 3, gather feedback from these stakeholders. And finally, to propose any new options that meet the 7 key points and parameters.
So our big question is, why restructure? We should see this as an opportunity to serve all students better. And I'm going to show you a list. Sorry, I've got to click. And talk a little bit about each of these opportunities. By direction of the Board of Education and the community forums, this list of opportunities has emerged, pushed by the fact that we have 2 new schools opening in August, and our school population growth has increased. Here's a list, starting with our new schools. Parents have also expressed, I'm going to go down to middle school options, sorry if I'm jumping. Parents have expressed a need for another middle school option, both for a smaller setting and programming which attracts our students. Our balanced calendar has families asking for the opportunity to continue year-round programming into the middle grades. Asheville High School and Silsa staff and families have expressed a desire to have all students with access to innovative academic opportunities while offering a non-traditional route for students. Elementary schools have experienced significant growth in enrollment, resulting in larger classes at all 5 schools. For several years, we have identified the need for a focus on early childhood. Restructuring gives us that opportunity to serve more students in the 3-4 range and ease that transition into kindergarten. Again, having an alternative or a non-traditional option has been shared through multiple feedback sources and enrollment. We're very proud of the fact that our district has had increases in enrollment, and we want to make sure that our district needs are matched with what is in the best interest of children. Here's 2 slides just kind of showing this increase in daily membership, an 18% increase over the past 5 years. And then another reminder that this 5-year growth trend at our elementary schools will soon reach our middle school.
So the process of collecting stakeholder feedback to date. The process started in November through the utilization of the following methods. There were community forums in November and December, administrative meetings throughout the fall and winter between district leadership and building level leadership, other conversations with the board and other stakeholders, and during the months of December and January, Dr. Baldwin met with all faculties at every school to discuss this issue. Based on input gathered from all stakeholder groups, 5 viable options emerged. Of the 5 that emerged, the board directed district leadership to further investigate option 4 through further conversations with the schools that were most directly impacted by this option. From these conversations, the following input was gathered with respect to the implementation of option 4. From the preschool group, I'm not going to read each one of these to you. You can read them as we're going along. This was feedback that was collected during those meetings and during those conversations. A couple of things that jumped out at me was folks wanted to know if they would have a position next year, and if so, where would that be? They wanted to be clear that they would be moved in pairs and not as individual classes to new sites. And they also was curious about the timeline and was concerned about the timeline. Recent input from the Hall Fletcher Elementary School community was the concern of losing the sense of community that that school has worked to build. They were concerned about kids being on two different campuses and what that would look like with respect to transitioning from one to another, from the sense of personnel, and also what's it going to look like and how is it going to impact their younger students to be with older students in that middle school setting. There was also the concern that things might be moving too fast and too many moving parts right now in the Hall Fletcher community. Some input gathered from Asheville High School. Option 4 would provide the autonomy for an alternative program that would be located on a campus not on the Asheville High School campus. It would allow students at the middle school level to have a true STEAM focus before they got to high school, which would help all students, or theoretically help all students once they got to those math and science classes in particular in high school. It will meet the needs of students with specific needs with less distractions. And it would free up some physical space for classrooms and for the roving teachers at Asheville High School. Anybody need more time to read those? I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can.
Opportunity to bring back some older programs that were working before the program was absorbed back. Was that in the alternative program?
Somebody that was in that meeting.
To the bottom point.
I think that really came from Asheville High School and sent us by the principal. I assume that meant that there was some programming for alternative school that was working prior to this transition to the campus.
Yeah, like when Dr. Grant was the principal there, partnerships with the community and in terms of scheduling and things like that.
So you're thinking that's where that came from, Will?
I think that was the discussion. That
Okay.
We've been limited in terms of our alternative program.
Right.
Because it's pretty much just the high school now.
Okay.
There's not any flexibility since they're on the same campus and all the same.
Right. You good, Lenore? You sure? Okay. Some more input from the Asheville High folks. It doesn't address option 4 would not address the growing student population overall at Asheville High School. It keeps SILSA on the Asheville High School campus. Funding for another campus as Montford. As long as SILSA stays on the Asheville High campus, they won't be able to grow and increase their offerings. And the next bullet, the transition from the balance calendar over at Hall Fletcher, should option 4 be implemented, could be a little bit tricky as students go into that high school environment. And again, that was just a couple that jumped out at me. I'll give you the opportunity to finish reading those before we move on. Everybody good?
Can you have the final one?
What is that reference?
So the last bullet point was that students, if they are moved to the Montford campus for an alternative school, want to have access to extracurriculars and everything that we do at the high school, plays, sports, all that. So, yeah.
It would exclude those folks.
It would exclude those,
Yes.
make it more difficult for them to be part of the other high school offerings that we have.
Yeah, and
Outside of
false
that.
increases in the budget for transportation and that kind of thing.
Yes, ma'am.
So are we going to have access to this?
Yes, you will.
Yes.
Y'all good? Yeah? Okay. Repurposing facilities. Option 4 involves the repurposing of 3 current facilities to maximize the utilization of our resources and, more importantly, maximize the impact on student learning in a positive way. The Montford, and this is kind of a review of those 3 facilities that will be impacted by the proposal of option 4. The Montford campus, constructed in '52, is an elementary school. It's 4,200 square feet, or 4,200 square feet added in 1956. Another 11,600 square feet added in 1990 at a cost of $2.5 million. The current enrollment with Isaac Dixon students is 488 students. Now, something we need to mention about the Montford campus is that the current barrier, there's some barriers over there that created the bus lane for Isaac Dixon, was done so through an agreement with the city. This agreement runs out this year. For safety purposes, we will not have a bus lane and parent drop-off in the same location. Yes.
So I'm just wondering if anyone has gone back and done a little research, because when I was running out of elementary school, there was a bus lane and a drop-off for many years. So I'm just wondering, what was the change, what happened that disappeared, and is there a possibility that through the city we could go back to the way it was when it was Randolph Elementary School and they were able to drop off and they did have a bus lane?
Right. Don, would you be the one that would speak to that?
That was a very small population, too.
I was going to say, my guess would be enrollment numbers. I'm not sure how many were enrolled.
There were less than 200 students for 4th and 5th grade.
Keeping the current configuration for the bus lane, if you're saying it's not allowed.
Yes, that's correct.
And is that through the city or?
That is through the city.
And there's no wiggle room on that, like to?
My understanding is that agreement that we have with the city runs out this school year.
Can we renegotiate it?
That's what I'm,
Sure, there's a chance that we can go back to the city, and once we decide the programs and what we're going to do with this school, go back to the city. As well as that's worked out, we now have a history, and the city's not as, the community's not as bothered with it now, since we've done it, it's worked. So there's always an option to explore exactly what we have now, and deal with the city traffic engineer and others.
Thank you, Don. Asheville City Schools preschool, constructed in 1952, 12,000 square feet added in 1956 and 1976, including a gym. New elevator was added in 2009 at a cost of $240,000, and the current enrollment is 180 students. Again, a little side note about the Asheville City Schools preschool building: it is restricted by land in such a way that it would be very difficult to expand the parking lot, and depending on the number of students enrolled, there could be a pretty significant problem there with traffic flow due to the location of the school.
The full capacity is 250?
For that building,
Yeah.
is that correct? No, I'm going to defer to.
It has more classrooms than that, but 250 is the number we talk about for total preschool kids. Possibly that size, that was one option that's, I think, fading now. But the school will hold more like 400 if you used every classroom.
Okay.
Could
It
you
just
legally
depends on how
do
you
that
use
with
those
that
classes.
age group?
What's that?
Is that school, I mean, is that preschool adaptable enough that you can use it for every, I mean, aren't there malls that require that age group to all be on ground level or?
Yeah, so there's a lot of classrooms that we could never use for preschool classrooms, or my understanding is even K through 2 because of the requirement for the access directly to the outside, which currently are used for offices and storage space, but have been classrooms in the past and could be in the future.
So
But it
capacity
is still
depends
smaller
on
than the
how
other
you
elementary
use
school
it.
seats.
Basically.
Hall Fletcher, constructed in 1976, classroom additions and renovations in 98 at $1.8 million. Current enrollment is 351. So that is the 3 facilities that will possibly be impacted by option 4 should it be implemented.
These are the board-approved key points that came to be at the board work session on February 16th, and these are the guidelines for the restructuring decisions. And again, these bullet points are important, and I'm going to read them to you. To enhance academic achievement, address and plan for growth at all levels while maximizing facility capacity when possible, expand preschool options to the elementary schools, address the need for a non-traditional secondary school, consider feedback from community that a small middle school option be included in the restructuring plan, consider feedback from the community that SILSA remain on the Asheville High campus, recognize that parking, parent drop-off and pickup, and yellow school bus traffic at both Asheville City's preschool and the Montford campus present challenges that must be addressed. For example, leaving barriers on Montford Avenue was originally approved as only a temporary solution, and we've already discussed that, and Don addressed that piece. Sure. You're going to be getting this, you're going to get copies of this PowerPoint. So they will be made available to you.
And are we also going to hear something that tells us how option 4 addresses each of those?
You're going to see all the options, and you'll be able to determine that in your work session. You'll be able to look at all of that. These are the numbers, the figures that were used to build the options. And you can see in the yellow box, that is our current enrollment, pre-K, K-5, 6-8, and 9-12. And then the green box is the projected enrollment in another 2.5 years now, the year 18-19, for pre-K, K-5, 6-8, and 9-12. And I'm just going to give you a minute to look over those figures. Sure.
I've heard it a couple times with the middle school growing, but why is the 6-8 number so much higher than any of the other?
Take a look at note 3 if you haven't already. That may answer.
Yeah, the growth seems out of proportion, but there are 1,100 students now enrolled in grades 3-5.
Cynthia, what's the capacity for the new middle school building?
Donna, what is the capacity for the new middle school?
It was designed to hold 900 students. Now, we have looked, and if you put more than 25 students in the classroom, or if we utilize some of the classrooms that were designed for a specific purpose, we can hold 900 students in that school. But the original design was for 900 students.
Yep.
And can you tell us how many of the students that are currently enrolled are out of district?
I can't.
I can go get that. For the entire district or for the
No, just for the middle school and for the high school.
And sorry. It looks like the pre-K number may not include our Hall Fletcher classroom. So add 18.
It also does not include
The younger.
the ones you do in home settings.
Well, we have 2 classrooms of younger children that we still have with us right now because of the toddler program that we phased out. We didn't have anyone leave who was already with us, but we're not enrolling more children than we're
So add 25 to that 126. Thank you.
Yeah, let's project enrollments. I'm just wondering how much of that is accounting for out of district students as well. And that's at all of them.
What's
Yep.
the source for this projection? Is it district or is this DPI's projection?
I'm going to say, you correct me if I'm wrong, it's trend data and historical data and the way the projections have been done over time. The history tells us this is what's going to happen.
Because I feel like DPI has released projections. Do we know how that matches with what we're projecting?
I don't know about that.
Yeah, we have a backup slide, but basically what it says is that DPI has us as one of 19 districts out of 115 that's going to grow in the next 10 years. We're only one of 19. They show numbers now that are already 125 behind where we we actually are, because their projection was for this year, next year, all the way for 10 years out. So the 2% growth per year, except for this middle school level, we have coming through. But these, to answer one other question, these numbers, projections do include maintaining sort of our current out-of-district population, and that is on the table, if that's fair to say, Dr. McAllister. We're looking at that piece of this whole restructuring puzzle, our whole out-of-district enrollment process and numbers. Correct?
All right, so I'm going to go through some of the original options that you've seen if you went to the community forum nights, so that it'll look a little familiar. We went back through and highlighted in red pieces that kind of disqualified it for being a really viable option. Again, you're going to get a copy of this, okay? So I think that as we move forward and look at some of these options and we get to the actual table group work, some of those conversations can be put down as pros and cons. But let's look at some of the options that have kind of come and passed and what's considered viable. So this original option was proposed at the community forum, so some of you should be familiar with seeing it, which has at the SILSA moving to the Montford campus. Okay, that was an idea that was brought forward. It was not viable, well, one, because a lot of the SILSA faculty and parents did not consider that an option that was appropriate because it would deny them access to the activities and the resources that were on the Asheville High School campus. So
can I just add a few things
okay.
about that? When we talk about the alternative school students would face the same challenges. They probably have less vocal parents. But I know from an Asheville High, and I've worked with a lot of SILSA kids with speech and debate, so I say this is an ally for SILSA. But I know that there wasn't much of a conversation on Asheville High's campus about that feasibility. In fact, the only conversations I've had was if they moved to the Montford campus, how would that work logistically?
Right. And feedback wasn't from just one source. It came from the community forums. It came from feedback that was sent throughout the process as well. So I want to make that note. And also, this doesn't include an option, a non-traditional option at all.
Absolutely. Did you say that something?
I just wanted to ask what the criteria were for taking that option off the table other than community feedback. Were there other considerations?
So yes, there was. So the traffic was a consideration as well when we were talking about size and growing that. So there's usually going to be about 3 or 4 different reasons that it may not have been viable. So the size, the non-traditional option was very popular. A lot of people really felt strongly that we needed that, but also just the traffic constraints that were in the Montford campus as well.
There are no science labs on the Montford campus, and the amount of money costs to reconfigure that building, I think, put it out of reach.
Well, what about AV Tech? AV Tech can't take any of this?
Well, let me keep working through the options, so that may come up. It may also come up in your table group work. No, it's okay. I mean, I want you to ask questions. I just want to make sure I'm giving you all the information so that you can hear that piece. Okay, so option 1 was presented in January of this year, and it has the Montford as a pre-K2 flowing into the Dixon. And I know it's kind of hard because I'm standing here with my glasses on, it's still hard. So the pieces that kind of made that not a viable option was, again, we had this traffic agreement so that anytime you're looking at having cars and buses at that Montford campus, it's going to have some constraints. There's no traditional option for 912, and we've just built a new Isaac Dixon school, and that was also an expression of, I'm sorry, Libby. Go ahead.
Sorry. So I just have to make a comment about the process because it seems like we're going through options and telling why they weren't viable. And so it feels like 5 options were presented to the board with 4 of them not being viable. So are you really giving the board something to look at? If you're giving them options, you should give them 5 viable options and they can look at those 5 viable options.
And there have been viable, yes. So what I'm presenting today is kind of those original ones or pieces that people have heard about and just addressing what did not seem to be viable about those options, but other options have been presented. Does that, Dr. Baldwin, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, and the other.
I don't want to
purpose of this
misspeak.
is to kind of go through our thought process as we went through all the options that we saw, so that you have an idea when you begin to build your own options if you choose to. So you have an idea of where we were headed and where we had saw some areas. Maybe you can find a way to break down those areas for us, but we couldn't find them through the process. So the expression of here's why we saw this is not viable, you may come up with an answer and go, here's how we make it viable. And that would be wonderful. But we want you to hear the thought process for how we ended up where we ended up. That's the point of this conversation.
An additional piece of this is the Hoff-Letcher National Middle School. We want to make sure that we are using those campuses to capacity and maximizing our resources as well.
And also heard something about the construction projects that Dixon needing to be similar to what the funds were approved for through the county. Does that ring a bell? That you might have difficulty in having a different grade configuration than what your construction funds were approved for?
That was not a conversation that I was part of.
So that building has, preschool classrooms,
May have made it.
classrooms and that kind of thing that could not be utilized appropriately. But again, that was the thing that we had at the time, that grades 3 to 12 and not classrooms that were brand new and built for that configuration, that grade level. And maybe there was another option to not do that.
And if I could add real quickly, to me, one of the things we heard the strongest was, and you mentioned it, to design, build, and open a new elementary school, and then say, oh, by the way, we're making it 3-5. That made it not feasible to some people, but that doesn't make it impossible if we want to go that way. I think that's what Dr. Ball was saying. You know, we ruled out because we wanted to be logical, but maybe you can think of a different way.
So option 2 is presented in January of this year, and that size of the preschool is kind of starts to exceed what it can handle in capacity for traffic. We know traffic's a problem. Even transforming some of those parking options behind the school, you still have to have logistic drops for buses and for cars. This plan does not optimize the Hoff-Letcher space or the middle school space. We've got a brand new middle school, and to only, put 2 grades in there, don't really make that a viable option. And again, we're back to using the Montford campus in a way that would be prohibitive with the traffic restrictions from the city of Asheville. And there's no alternative, a non-traditional program on the table there. Option 3, I have to refresh each time I look at this, it changes. Okay, so again, this had the preschool at being too large for that space, for the needs of the building, for the physical layout and the parking. It also has the Montford at pre-K, and as we've discussed, that building was not designed for those students. And so, and then looking at Hoff-Letcher and Asheville Middle School, the capacity piece is there, but those other pieces exclude it. And again, there is not a non-traditional example. Okay, so let's look at option 4. So for some folks, actually this may be the first time to see it in this layout. So just kind of walking through that, I'm going to give you a minute to absorb it. It does have the non-traditional campus, move to Montford, maximizing National Middle School, and offering a smaller middle school component through Hoff-Letcher.
So does that maximize the capacity of the preschool, and where's the traffic issue? Because I know there's an issue with not having enough.
Right, so in the traffic studies that they've done internally through our maintenance department and the preschool, what they've looked at is how many students can we realistically take based on traffic patterns, the amount of enrollment, and then this is how it influenced that decision.
But my question is, does that maximize?
It maximizes the usable space. So as we've kind of established, not all of that space can be used just for preschool, so there's definitely some construction pieces that go into it, but it maximizes those pieces that we could use. That does an answer?
Not really, because I think we keep talking about So if we are considering splitting a school up and making the preschool a K-3 school, and there's a lot of space that we can't use, and is that really
Effective
the best
use of our
interest if
facility.
we're talking about how to maximize?
I think that's a great question, and one that we've tried to ask and answer when we go through each one, but it's definitely one I would suggest when you're at your table group that you put under the pros and the cons and question, is that using it, and could we reevaluate it?
And if you have a floor plan and have a sense of which buildings have exits and which don't, if that's helpful to two groups talking.
So on the non-traditional secondary program on the Montford campus, are we talking about what's generally been referred to as our alternative program? How do we make that building, I don't know the right terms, high school ready for those students to have access for science and, those kind of labs for those students?
Great question. So we're working on,
Looking at Mr.
and have been
Sims.
working on since forever, partnerships and grants that would allow us to do that, that are specialized for that area. And that's really where the funding is, in areas of non-traditional high schools, small high schools, alternative education of sorts. And we have a really great partnership already with AD Tech. That is a kind of easy conversation to have because we're already reaching out to them in so many other ways. And so saying all that, we feel a non-traditional secondary program on any campus has some funding and some partnerships opportunities that we really could explore, unlike many other funding opportunities that just aren't looking for, like there's no funding for 3 of those, for example. There is funding for non-traditional settings for secondary schools. And
So that funding would be used to put in like science labs
and pathways to AD Tech, and for example.
But they would not have to be on the AD Tech campus. They could
Correct.
be in that stabilized in one place.
Correct.
And how many students do you project to put at that campus?
That is a great question. I'm not sure the answer to right now. I predict that we have about 200 kids that we could serve in that way, just talking with high school staff and alternative staff and those kinds of opportunities. That's not all I have.
Would that be an all-day program or flex hours?
It could be all day, flex hours, and year-round. And I think those are all opportunities that would be great for our students.
And when it was on the Randolph campus originally.
Great. We were up in numbers 60 or 70.
All right.
I don't mean to be rude, but we have 4 days to get this to our staff, and we're 30 minutes into our work session. Is there any way we can hold questions till after so we can maximize our time?
I think all of us have made note of those questions, so let me present you with this last piece. Option 5, again from January of this year, and again, it's turning the preschool into a much larger facility or a much larger school than it was built to handle. And it's putting middle school traffic back into Montford, which has proven to not be viable. So, introductions, Ms. Sellinger. We're almost to the end where we can start working in those groups.
And I'm going to actually explain what your group work is for.
Good prompt.
You are going to be getting a packet of information as I talk. Everybody will get a copy of this packet. And also on your salmon-colored sheet of paper is a little checklist of what your group is to do while you work. So what you're going to do is review these key points and parameters that the board has approved that will be used in making decisions about the restructuring process. So review those. And then discuss the merits and challenges of the various options that are provided in the packet that you're going to get and that Sarah just went over. Discuss any new options that are emerging from your school team and or this large committee when we talk at the end. Select what your team feels is a viable option for the district, and then create a brief report highlighted by your 2 most important findings or conclusions, plus your proposed option. So you've got your packet, you've got your checklist, and a step-by-step view of what you need to do in your team, in your school teams. And we're going to give you, yes, Will?
So I want to address the issue brought up by my colleague, friend, and Paul Fletcher. And I think it's the elephant in the room. We all walked through the parents who are outside, and we've seen the reaction to this. So my 2 points or my 2 questions. One is I'd like to be able to communicate to my staff what the rush is. And all the information in terms of, the only thing I've seen in terms of a timeline has to do with budgeting and presenting something to the Buncombe County Commissioners. So that's number one, because just right there, we wouldn't have to be rushing in 15 minutes. Yeah. The second thing is you can't mandate buy-in. And as I walk through here, I walk through community members that I know, and I'm not saying that anyone, any actor here is not sincere in wanting what's best for our district. But what I also don't want is for us to have 4-person teams to go back to our schools and be scapegoated for a decision that's already been made. So I think if there's 2 pieces, and I mean, I understand that we have a task in front of us, but I think the first task that we have at the high school and at all our schools is to communicate to our communities how this is a legitimate process, because without that, it doesn't matter what any of us do or say about anything. The decision's already been made in those people's minds. So I'd love to just hear about the timing, and I absolutely, like what I said about the actors being sincere, I know that, I mean, I know so many of the people involved, but like, that's the elephant, and let's talk about it so that we're not rushing. Or, let's stay till 9 and get it done right. But I don't want to walk back out through if there's still protesters out there. I mean,
So I'm going to try to address that, Will. Thank you for asking that question. So there's not a rush in making a final decision. The rush for us, for me, is that we need a direction, because the current issues, the current concerns that we've shared today are the concerns in our reality today. And so we do have large class sizes at grades 3 through 5, some that we can address by adding teachers to the buildings that kind of, unfortunately, we're taking away some, elective classrooms, and we're doing some things to shift around to reduce that burden of large class sizes, grades 3 through 5. But we do next year have an empty building that will take us a good year to plan appropriately. And without some direction on what happens to that Montfort campus right now, it's going to only delay what we need to do for a secondary campus or a middle school or whatever it is, because it'll take us a good year, no matter what decision we make, to do something with that campus. The second part of that is, as we continue to talk about the needs of this district, as you saw, even as we try to address the out-of-district enrollment, which we are doing on the kindergarten end, we still have students in our buildings who need us in smaller class sizes and us to be able to serve them in an appropriate way. And so the direction that we need is, how do we do that appropriately? Do we and can we add teachers? Does that mean then that we cannot add preschools? If that's the case, we need to know that now so that we can move forward. We all agree in this room, and all we have been agreeing in this room and all across the district, that the way to address some of our learning gaps and some of our opportunities at the elementary level is that we need some preschool classrooms and some more opportunities for students who are struggling. That's not been a secret. But in order to do that, we need to make space somehow. And in order to do that, we need time to plan that out. So do we need to say right this second, option 4 is the only way to do that? Absolutely not. But do we need time to plan in 2016-17 to make something happen? We do. And so that's why we're here. We are here to go through the process from November to now and say, here are our challenges. Parking, transportation, student achievement, our alternative or non-traditional high school. We have basically 3 schedules running on a high school campus. For any of you that have ever been on a high school campus, that's pretty crazy. And if we have an opportunity to address that, we should. We also have an opportunity to address some of our middle school students in a large middle school who are not having their needs met. It is important that the leadership team, that the entire school community at least acknowledge that and then see if we can devise a plan to address it. At the same time, we have growth in West Asheville that's going to probably, in predictions, meet what we have right now. So if we make a plan, we need a plan that doesn't last 3 years or 4 years, that lasts for decades to accommodate that growth. Because our little babies in West Asheville are going to eventually be 5-year-olds. And when they are 5-year-olds, we're going to be real close to 5,000 children. And right now, with the current structure, we can't serve those students, not appropriately. And so we're here for help and direction and conversation about, here are our challenges, here's what we've done since November, here's what we know we can do, and here's where we feel we are falling short. We need your help.
Thank you.
So I think,
Appreciate you saying that.
so I think we need more time. Is there any way that the Board of Education's final decision can be pushed back to early April?
Yes.
I think that there are portions, and we described this in our last meeting, there are portions of this decision that can be pushed to a later date. There are portions of this decision that we need to move forward on very soon for a number of reasons. One being, and I know you don't want to hear it, but one of them is budget. The other, though, is personnel. We want to be generous to our personnel in that if we need to make a change, they should be able to know now, not in May or June. I don't think that's fair to our personnel. It's not fair. If, for example, we're making some kind of shift or we need to transfer or add classrooms to other buildings to accommodate growth, that means moving teachers and teacher assistants and maybe other staff. We don't want to tell them in June. I don't think that's fair. And so if there's a direction that we need to move that will require us to move personnel, we should tell them soon. Because transfer notices, as the staff knows, comes out in March. And if we don't give an opportunity for you to be able to say, that's not my choice, this is, then we're doing a disservice to our employees. And that's just not right.
I just feel like the community thinks that this is rushed through, that we're not making real decision. And if there's any amount of time that could be given to us, it just seems like it makes sense.
I hear you, Will. And here's what I will say. And please believe me, give me some trust today. I don't have a dog in this fight except the children in Asheville City Schools. I know without a shadow of a doubt in my heart that we have got to serve preschool children in Asheville City Schools. That's my dog. It's really the only dog in this fight. If we can figure out how to do that and provide opportunities for 3- and 4-year-olds with very few barriers, none would be nice. Whatever we come up with after that, we'll work on together. But I don't believe, and it's a non-negotiable for me, and it is what it is, that we don't serve 3- and 4-year-olds as to the best of our ability, because that is the need in our district. Whatever else we come up with, I think we'll need to figure out together. I do also tell you that when I walk on that Asheville High School campus with SILSA and our AHA program, we have got to do something to address the needs of students that are going out into the workforce in a few years, that are going out to college in a few years. I won't put my head on a pillow and go to sleep knowing that we haven't done the best thing we can do for our 16, 15 to 19-year-old children. I just can't do it. And so if we can figure out a way to address those 3 campuses on that one campus, that will be wonderful for Asheville City Schools, because at the end of the day, I need to sign a diploma that says I certify this graduate. And I will not do that if I don't feel comfortable with it.
I just want to say, first of all, thank you for saying that. And I feel like if that had been said in November, and we all could have been brought to the table like this in November, the reception would be different. So I think that while there is some sense of urgency, and I understand, I have a child who's in first grade, she's going to be in high school at some point. I don't want her needs to be met. I have nieces and nephews who are 3 and 4 and coming into the system. But as a parent and as an employee, it feels like now there's a sense of urgency. We should have been shown this in November. We should have had this in November. And so I think it behooves the district to stop and say, okay, so we know there's a sense of urgency, but we also recognize that maybe we didn't communicate the best that we could have. Maybe we didn't really let you know what the stakes were, and we recognize that we have a need to have you more informed going to give you the time that you need to help us work this problem through. Because if we keep proceeding at the rate that we're proceeding, the perception is that your decision is already made, and we're just here, like, this is 3 hours out of my life with my daughter. And I don't sit here for 3 hours if a decision is made.
I acknowledge that, and there's not a decision made. We want help, and we want to make sure that we are working for all students in Asheville City Schools, pre-K to 12th grade and beyond. And the only way to do that is if we come together as a team, as a district, and make sure we make decisions that are best for all kids. And if I haven't said it enough, I'll say it one more time. That is all I care about.
I just hope that, I talked to Peggy back in the fall, and I said there's a storm brewing. And now you're seeing the storm come to fruition. We need to move forward as a team together with a united front where we can honestly say what the problems are. And I think as the superintendent, speaking to the parents and saying that very thing, here are the issues. Your dog in the fight is not just your pre-K kids. Your dog in the fight is that you've got seniors at Asheville High applying for colleges without the correct credits and SILSA, without the right things that colleges are looking for. So you got a dog in every fight.
What I mean by that is the restructure conversation, not, of course, I agree with that.
Okay, so.
I guess what I would like to understand is if when you say you want to slow down this process, tell me what that time frame is. Somebody said to early April.
We are our district's best chance of making this restructuring process viable and fair and
will you speak to the mic just so I can capture that on video? Sure.
I guess what I would like to understand is if when you say you want to slow down this process, tell me what that time frame is. Somebody said to early April.
We are our district's best chance of making this restructuring process viable and fair and so that there's true buy-in for our community. I don't feel like in the next week that's enough time. So if there would be any way that this group, if we could have it early April perhaps. I mean, I don't know. I mean, to me, it's Hall Fletcher, it's the preschool, it's the elementary schools, it's the middle school who's going to be, I mean, really, I feel like Asheville High, in one sense, like we have the least that to figure out. Like we know what we need, and you know, like it's 24
Our
kids.
parents are okay with what's.
But we want to support you all. So to me, early April seems more reasonable to give us time to get buy-in.
Angela?
I appreciate y'all saying that. I want to just say, as a co-president, you know, I've been out in the community and I'm hearing everything you guys are saying. And just to say to you, Ms. Dahlman, that's what our community is asking. I do think that when it all came out, everybody's emotions was just like that. And since then, the way some things have been conveyed, it's pretty much like this. And that's no way to get anything done.
Yeah, I agree.
And, you know, then we have friends at Isaac Dixon, Vance, we're all kind of talking, but we're all talking and we're all kind of feeling like we're on shaky ground because we're not really sure what this one knows, what that one knows. And I agree with him. Right now, at this particular moment, yes, we had a forum and we asked for more time. Yeah, we got more time basically till March the 7th. So even though, yes, it's been pushed back a week, it still feels like Ms. Engel said. We've got 4 days to get in there, talk to our people, try to get the community that has not spoke out and get something together and present it to you by Monday. That's like, wait a minute, what? So if there's a way to do that, I'm with him. If we know that you guys are gonna be like, okay, we hear you. The middle of April, we're going to do that. I know for a fact all of us are going to band together as PTO people and as a community, and we can put this together. You tell us what you want, the structure around how you want it. We're all smart people, and we can figure this out and make this work. Because the teachers, they know what their students need. The principals know what they need as well. And we're the ones that talk, the parents, we talk to the communities. And being a president my first year, I've been hearing a lot here lately.
Yeah.
So there is a way to do that, to present to them, hey guys, we hear you, we're gonna hold it off, and then we're gonna reconvene and get it back together.
Okay, so
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to be clear, because we don't want to change the time frame and have it not be enough, or, whatever. So if we're going to do that, I want to make sure that we do it in a smart way, okay? So you said the beginning of April, and you said mid-April. And I'm not trying to push you here, but we really would need to understand. So that's...
Make the recommendation that in their groups, they have a conversation with their school.
Okay.
Rather than do that out.
Okay, all right, so...
There may be some disagreement.
That's great, yeah.
But I'd rather the school.
And that's okay, because we would need to come to a consensus. Then the other thing in your groups to talk about is what is it that happens in that time? What do you need in order to do the work that you see? What does that look like? Okay, because I think that that's really important also. Again, we don't want to create a process that then doesn't meet the needs, right? So we do want your help, as Dr. Baldwin said. Yeah, Polly?
The piece that I feel like I need before I can do group work is to understand, in order to add a preschool classroom at an elementary school, is it as simple as moving one classroom somewhere else and not filling that classroom, or is it more complicated than that, and how can I understand that so that I know what's viable? I know there's facilities issues, but I mean, facilities issues aside in terms of capacity. If we add one preschool room, does that then mean that you can't have the same number of kindergartens through fifth grade? And where is that an issue and where is it not? And if it is an issue, then does that mean that you have to have 3 pre-grade classrooms? Does that mean that how many elementary classrooms are we talking about shifting out of a particular building in order to make one preschool classroom viable? So that's the other thing that I feel like I might need to know before going further. And then the second piece is how many elementary students are we trying to add with the restructuring option that we recommend? And when I look at the current to the 2020 projection, it's just an extra 100 students, and they could all fit at Hall Fletcher, which is under enrolled, if they were attracted or just enrolled that way. But sure, I guess we're planning beyond 2020 for that population, and if so, what's our target so that we feel good about whatever the elementary configuration is that our option proposes.
I'd just like to add one thing. If we do have an extra month, one thing that I would like to be able to have a chance to not just sit with my friends at the high school, but to sit in mixed groups. That's the hardest part as I was preparing for this, is trying to know what's going on at the middle school, what's going on at the preschool. So one meeting, if we, I'm not asking more meetings, but an opportunity to be able to really, like, I think we are the ones who will make this happen. It's exciting, but I just don't know what I need to know. Right.
Okay, so let's start. You've brought up some excellent points, and I believe Peggy gave you a directive to put in your plan today that you're getting ready to work on, those recommendations and how much time you need, what you need to do within that time. Here are the guidelines for the next 45 minutes, and they are also on your salmon-colored piece of paper, a little checklist to use as you work through your packet, your review of these options, and if you have different options that you want to put on the table.
Now, to be able to move forward in August. That's all we're asking for. We're not asking the board to vote for on March 7th or April 4th for the absolute final option. What we've asked for from the beginning is a year of planning and a direction. So the conversation that we're having right now is only going to help us get to the direction. It's still not going to force the board to make a decision this month or next. We just need a direction to move forward on the key points that we talked about when it comes to enrollment at Hall Fletcher, enrollment at the preschool, whether there's going to be a 6th or 7th grade at Hall Fletcher next year. All we're talking about is next year. And so this timeline we're talking about is still not going to get us to a final option, because the board could very well say we're not going to make a final option, final decision until the summer. And that doesn't impact our planning, except for the few items I've asked for, and that's it.
So is April 4th count as now then, if we have that direction by April 4th?
No, we need that before the budget, March 7th. Because that's the budget, which are key decisions related to 6th and 7th grade at all Fletcher, when the preschool goes to 1st to 2nd grade next year, whether we are able to go ahead and continue our expansion of preschool next year, what we do with that Montfort campus in general, if it's going to be big kids or little kids. Those are the things we need to move forward. Any of those that the board would like to table, we just need to know that, so we know we can't move forward. Any of those that we can have decisions about right now helps us create a budget and talk to personnel.
I don't feel like March 7th is feasible if we're trying to build buy-in with the community and get feedback and communicate with each other across schools. I feel like we've just begun.
Seconded.
I agree with what Hall Fletcher team proposed of giving us 2 weeks, and I think in that time, personally, I feel like Kenny and I can talk with our stakeholders and come up with a viable option to present to you. And not that I don't want to collaborate, but I feel like maybe our best work is done in working with the people we know and trust, and then presenting it for y'all to agree or disagree with. I don't know for me personally that meeting again to have this repeat conversation would be productive. But I would like an extra week to speak with everyone at my school.
Thank you. So the proposal is an extra week to go back to the stakeholders and get feedback, which would take us to March 4th. Well, the 4th is on a Friday. So are we saying, how do you feel about having from now till March the 3rd to get your feedback from your stakeholders, your parents, your staff, on the information that's been presented tonight and any other options that you have talked about at your team, at your table with your team, to send?
Hold on, because all we have now is a bunch of little plans, right? Yeah. So that's not very helpful to present to the entire Asheville City School parent body and other stakeholders. In my opinion, we have to be able to discuss our various plans so that then we say, these are our 5 viable options. Because we all decided a lot of the plans we discussed tonight, they're no longer on the table. So if we're going to come up with viable options, I think we present them, not 2 more weeks to go talk to our little individual PTOs about our little individual plan. In my opinion, we need to hash this out. And if we've only got 2, I really question why we only have 2 weeks to do that. That's my question to you, please.
I haven't given the 2-week window.
Okay.
All I've asked for, one more time, is next step on the 4 or 5 bullet points I just talked about. What we do in the interim, I have not given a timeline. I have not said that. All I need to know right now for budget and personnel purposes are the 3 or 4 things I just said about 6th and 7th grade, preschool, and Montfort that don't impact what we're talking about now on a final option for whatever we end up doing. I just need to, and that's not really, I'm not asking that from you. We just need to move forward on direction so that we know for those 3 things I just stated, whatever the option ends up later, that's what we'll plan for. And I've asked for a year for that planning.
Right, but we do want to have a decision.
As soon as you can make it.
Well, so can I ask a question? So we're saying the direction. So let's say direction is putting a 1st grade classroom at the preschool. That to me is like stepping toward pre-K through 3rd grade after preschool.
Or not.
If we did that and then we said not, then we have to reload those kids all over. Right. Creating another transition for them. Right. So I just feel like that just seems to me like, what is going to change? What's going to happen next year if our schools stay the way they are at this moment? How is that going to impact the community? Is that going to be detrimental to our kids if we don't change something for next year? Because originally, my impression was that the implementation date was 2017-18. But now we're talking about going ahead and moving to first grade at the preschool.
Here's
making
why.
a decision about that campus.
Because no matter what, there are kindergartners currently sitting at the preschool campus. They're going to either have, I know Paula mentioned, they're going to either have the transition now or transition later. So all I need to know is when. Paula.
I'm wondering if there's some way at our next meeting those 4 bullet points to start with those and tier out what could we make a decision about that is not likely to have a negative effect regardless of the final restructuring decision. For instance, 6th and 7th at Hall Fletcher, could we start with that bullet point and then hear from each school, would anything detrimental happen if we were to continue to add 6th and 7th? Does that fly in the face of any proposed plans, things like that? And then, but adding grades at the preschool, we have a kindergarten right now. We'd like to know if they'll come here next year or if they need to go to other schools. The families would like to know. But I would really caution us against continuing to add grades without a clear direction for where we're going, because it's difficult to market that to families in the community. And while it won't affect our preschool programming, I would hate for us to accidentally grow a school with a poor reputation because we didn't use foresight in that respect. But it could be the kind of thing where you stop and hold off, and we decide we have to decide about adding grades to the preschool later after we've had more chance to plan toward that final direction. And then the pre-K expansion into the elementary schools, for instance, Jones and Dixon that we're recruiting for right now, I'm wondering if we could address that specifically and figure out, none of those scenarios have those schools losing their younger grades. It's really just a capacity issue. Can we add 1 or 2 classrooms to those schools without messing with the grade configuration long term or what that school needs to hold K-5? And then the Montfort campus, can we look at if there's a lot of support for the alternative school, is that a decision that could be made right now, or do we really need to wait to make sure we don't need to have elementary school age children or something like that? And focus on the things where we're all kind of sitting still. I don't know what's going to happen to these kids next year. And allow, in terms of something big like partnering us with Hall Fletcher or growing our own school at our site, allow that the time that we would want in order to design it and resource it and market it well.
Probably if I could add something to what you said, on the surface, it might seem like an easy question to answer. Do we add 7th grade to Hall Fletcher? But from the personnel perspective and the budgeting perspective and the student perspective, that's a very complex question. So just that one issue becomes very complex because most likely what we would look at is if we're going to grow Hall Fletcher next year to the 7th grade, it could actually mean that 2 teachers are transferred from Asheville Middle School. It's not that we're going to hire completely new teachers to fill those positions. So now we have 2 schools impacted. And so we have to, we talked about in the intent, is anyone currently at the middle school, are they interested in making that transfer because they want the balanced calendar, for instance? So just that one question is very complicated because in all likelihood, if we're going to grow Hall Fletcher into a middle school, it means that there are less middle schoolers going to the middle school campus. And so rather than hiring 2 7th grade teachers, we're actually looking at transferring furniture, books, materials, and personnel from the middle school to Hall Fletcher. That's why we need to know. We need to know from a personnel perspective. We need to know, from the existing 6th graders at Hall Fletcher, those parents probably want to know, like yesterday, is my child going to be going to the middle school next year, or will they even have a choice to stay at Hall Fletcher? So it's a that seems like a simple question, but it's actually pretty complex.
And I appreciate the opportunity to have that conversation with you all directly and members from the other schools.
And it's also, you know, the planning and support that Hall Fletcher would need to extend to the 7th grade. You know, it just goes on and on and on. One simple question is actually pretty complex. And the same is true for those other questions. You know, so if, for instance, the decision ends up being that we're going to stop Hall Fletcher at 5th grade, well, wouldn't it maybe have been better to maybe even just stop? Don't grow Hall Fletcher to 7th grade next year, because we have a pretty small class of 6th graders this year. And so maybe the decision is that those 6th graders, in fact, just need to transfer to the middle school if we can't make a decision. You know, so, again, we have to consider not just, you know, it's not just budgeting. It's people, it's students, you know, and like I said, I hope I've shown that that seems like a simple question, do we add the 7th grade? But it's actually pretty complex.
I think to do this right, we need to go forward. I mean, everything I just heard tells me that we need more time. And if we're going to be the group that's making this decision to build buy-in, not just to say it, and I really fear what it's going to do to our district long term if people don't get the perception that we're going to do this right. And I mean, really, like, we can't make the wrong decision. And I think that we need to go forth for the final, and maybe not the final, but even for making these smaller decisions. I don't know how I can go back to the people at high school and say, yeah, actually, we're still making decisions here. And just talking Silsa Alternative School, Asheville High, I think just that conversation will be difficult to have in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. We're not putting the weight of this decision for us. You just want to. Fortunately or unfortunately, that is the decision. Okay. But we do want to hear and understand from you, and it would be fabulous. It would be fabulous if this group could come to a consensus and say, you know what, we've talked to our stakeholders, we've talked to the staff, we've all cross-pollinated or whatever term we want to use, and we believe in this proposal and it meets your requirements. And here's why. That is the ultimate. But I just want to be clear. The decision is the board's. So I don't want.
We just come back with what we think, and then we vote or whatever.
Yeah, again, in a perfect world, there'd be a consensus in this group that represents, all the different stakeholders and all the different schools, and you guys all say, you know what? We like that. That looks like the best for our district, for our students, for our staff, for our families, in a perfect world.
So that that's something else that schools can go back to, and we can have at least, if not more, if there's any way, 2 weeks to talk about those plans, to talk about the key options about does Hall Fletcher, does our staff and our schools feel like Hall Fletcher should have a 7th grade next year? Should we add a 2nd grade to the preschool? So we can come back and say our school feels like this about having a 7th grade at Hall Fletcher, and we can tell you in 2 weeks that. I mean, that is a very short period of time to do that. But that's what you're asking, is for us to get that feedback on those key points the superintendent made, and then if we can try to talk about ideas that people have tonight so that we can share those with our staff when we get back. Is that an option to do in the little time we have left?
I think if we do that, it would have to be just present what you talked about, no discussion, no questions, just present it. I agree.
We're meeting tonight, and then we won't meet again until the 3rd. Is that what you said? I want the group here to try and say, I asked the group, because one thing that was apparent is we need more time, we need more time, we need more time.
Meeting tonight is waited until March 3rd instead of March 18th to 20th. Or do we meet Monday at the 29th? Realistically, what does everybody want to do? And that's something we could vote on.
So
Like,
April 4th is not an option.
It's not an option. We do have to make these interim decisions, you know? So you guys, I would love to get your input on that. So we do have to make those interim decisions.
Did anybody come up with any alternative options?
Yes, sorry.
Like, that's where the discussion should be right now.
Yes.
Did anybody come up with something better than what's presented? So then we can finish the meeting with at least presenting that to our faculty. Because right now it's option 4. It'd be nice to be able
And
to.
when we, before we leave, I'd love to come to consensus. So the board understands what you need by more time.
And that consensus is to gather the information, inform our staffs, and come back to the table to give you our information. I just want to be clear that I'm understanding.
I don't know why we spent this I wish we had just said in the beginning of this meeting that we're deciding on 6th and 7th grade at Hall Fletcher, preschool at Montford. There's no option 4. We're not talking about option 4. This is not what this is about now. This is talking about Hall Fletcher, preschool, and Montford. You're talking about all this other
It
stuff.
is intertwined if the reason why you would pair the preschool with Hall Fletcher is to increase elementary capacity. It's not the only way that you could do that. We could brainstorm other ways to do that as well. But in order to add grades at the preschool, you want to know where you're going. To add on to Hall Fletcher, you want to know where you're going with that too. So I see why it's connected to all of the decisions for the next 5 years, rather than deciding them piecemeal. But it is a very quick timeline
It's the most
if you think about
pressing
it.
thing for us to discuss and figure out.
Basically, the big thing is for Hall Fletcher is we don't want to be split up. I'm going to put it out there. We don't want to be split up. So any decisions that we make around that number one, we don't want to be split up. Okay? We know that we need to address the middle school, the capacities in the school. That's what we need to figure out. Now, if we leave here knowing that, one, we don't want to be split up, because if it was any of y'all's schools, y'all would not want to be split up either, right? Okay, so we all agree on that. Yeah, exactly. Asheville, Huntsville, y'all don't want to be split up. You can't be split, however that works out.
Some people want to split, some don't.
And some don't. Okay. So.
That's a different situation.
Yeah.
I got you. I got you. So here's my proposal. Y'all can shoot me if you want to. One, we know that Hall Fletcher don't want to be split. If it's y'all don't want to be split. Why don't we come back together, what, March the 3rd? Is that right? Because y'all are voting on this the 7th?
Right.
Is that timeline right?
Yes.
That gives us enough time. One, that's what we as a community ask for more time. That gives us enough time to go back to our schools and our communities. That gives y'all enough time to do the same thing. Come back together on March the 3rd, have this presented to y'all on the 7th, some kind of way it needs to get to y'all before y'all talk, and then go from there. There's your timeline right there. You're leaving here, you knowing what you're doing, you know what's expected of you. That's it right there. Now, if you disagree, just yell at me.
Wait, why are we still meeting February 29th?
No.
No. We're taking,
Because you need more
right,
time to
the
get
time that we ask for, that pushes the time. That gives everybody what they ask for. Because some people ask for more time. March the 3rd gives us enough time. Taking out this meeting, we don't want to be split up. We need to find capacity problems. We need to come up with a structure to do just that.
And we come back on the 3rd.
On the 3rd.
With those 3 things in mind.
Exactly.
Or just point.
At this point, right, I agree. At this point, me personally, I'm not saying option 4A, X, Y, Z. Those options are not a part of this. We are coming ground one. We don't want to be split up, period. 2, we got to figure out a way to make us all fit the capacity. They told us, they're telling us what they need. We just need to build to that, knowing what we know about our schools and our communities and what they're saying. March the 3rd. That gives us time to get that done. I think we can do it.
And before we were to go out, I'm assuming that Vance would also feel the same way, that they would not be interested in having intermediate type grades if it expanded capacity when you combine those by shifting, would there be any benefit to shifting lower grades to another building? And is that something that's worth talking about, or would it be rejected out of hand?
Yeah. That would be rejected.
We're like all and I'm wondering then if no one is, if the primary intermediate option doesn't appeal to anyone, but
it did to Claxton. We presented it back, I believe, in December, and we presented it very strongly. We wanted to be split, so we actually were okay with split. Claxton was. It was okay with us to have K3 and K2 at the Montgomery campus, and then 3-5 at our
We have 20 minutes left. Is it productive to just hear what each team came up with before we go back?
Yes. All right.
Well, you go back.
You identify your school when you come up. School team, please, for the TV
I'm
audience.
speaking for the Vance team.
Okay, thank you.
So we talked about, we like the idea of implementing pre-K at Jones and Dixon, and the phase-in at Claxton we talked about. That would, we do agree with spreading out the preschool across the district because it creates equal access for pre-K for all of our families across the district. For middle school, we liked developing, as originally planned, Hall Fletcher as the K-8 school. That we figured, I don't know, we were kind of estimating some numbers of taking 120 out of the middle school. But in order to do that, we feel like the middle school at Hall Fletcher needs to be fully developed as a middle school with specialist, band, athletics, the whole 9 yards to be able to promote students on that campus. We also talked about we like the idea of the alternative school at the Montford campus, you know, whatever that might look like. That might take, I don't know, we're estimating about 100 kids, I don't know. It might take 100 kids off Asheville High's campus. And then moving SILSA to AB Tech. We have an AB Tech employee here who was talking about so much space at AB Tech, but I know there's a lot of other factors in there. But right now SILSA's at 380, so that may take another 380 off of that campus, which would create more space for Asheville High on that campus. Did I leave anything else out?
That's good.
It seemed like I'm from the preschool team. We were also supportive of the alternative high school at the Montford campus if it's resourced and planned well, and also supportive of older grades at Hall Fletcher if it's resourced and planned well. In terms of the preschool location, we feel strongly about having at least a chunk of preschool classrooms in that building for the opportunity for staff collaboration and staff development. So, you know, perhaps 6 is what historically we've had at that site, which still leaves plenty of room to grow. But we also like the idea of expanding into the elementary schools as well because it creates access across the community and broadens who is coming into our programs. It even changes what the demographics of our main campus look like as we shift some grant funding into additional sites. And then, but ideally, we would have 2 pre-K classrooms in the elementary schools where we go because that offers more opportunity for the teachers to plan together. It still seems worth talking about if we could only fit 1 because of capacity issues. It's probably still worth doing even though it's not ideal for the teacher. Just because of the community demand, which has been huge for the Hall Fletcher side and for Dixon and Jones, which only exist in theory. And then in terms of elementary options being added to our building, there also would be benefit to having at least 2 grades of each classroom because of the collaboration for the teacher. If anything smaller would have to be designed extremely well and attract staff that can work vertically as opposed to horizontally. And then I think the biggest priority is to design, when you have older grades in our building, know what the total plan is for those children in a way that we can feel good about it and market it to the community. So design, resource, and market it well. Getting feedback from the community about if we have a very small school with elementary schoolers in the other hallway of the preschool, what does the community need? How could we make this a wonderful school that makes sense to have a 3rd option in West Asheville? And then, in general, we seem open to pairing with another school or designing something on our own as long as it's planned in a way that is excellent for the students and that we feel good about sharing the space. I think that's it.
And possibly have central offices over there, since there's classrooms that couldn't be used as elementary school classrooms as well. And then keep our 5 elementary schools, either try to include pre-K through 5 at those, and have Hall Fletcher be a STEAM elementary school to grow capacity there. And then move all of those 5 into 2 options for middle school, where you would have a STEAM middle school on the Montfort campus, 6 through 8 or either 5 through 6, and Asheville Middle School 6 through 8 or either 7 through 8. And so those are all just like, we're not sure, we're just thinking about all these options right now. And then, of course, our middle schools would feed into Asheville High, Silsa, and then an alternative school, central office, or repurpose the old middle school in some way. I know that's probably really hard, and I don't understand the construction part of it, but that, or maybe an AB Tech option for those students. So those are just a few ideas we have. Right, making sure that the STEAM campus, if we did STEAM at the Montfort campus, to be intentionally observant of making sure that it's a diversified school, so that we may not everybody may get in there that wants to, but we ensure that to happen. Is that what you're speaking of? Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. And then the transportation issue with Montfort, because I know that's a big issue. We thought about if there's any other creative ways to solve that by that back road that comes up through. I don't know if any of you've ever driven there, but if somehow kids could get out there, go up through the field to the school, if it was a middle school, that might be a little more doable than at the current, with elementary school students.
I think our priorities are to support the middle school, preschool, and Hall Fletcher specifically as they transition. So if the support is there district-wide, Hall Fletcher K-8, the preschool classroom, if they are going to be moved out to each of the elementary schools, to ensure that there's 2 teachers per school. In terms of the high school specifically, we think that the Montfort campus might be underutilized if it is just an alternative school. So we talked about exploring eventually moving into a 6-12 program that is an alternative school, not just for kids with behavioral issues, but true alternatives. We talked about opening a career academy in terms of some of the career technical things that we do at the high school. It's a gym at the high school. And we absolutely would defer to our colleagues at SILSA, but we think that if they stay on our campus, they're not going to have time to grow. So we started talking about brainstorming if there are more kids on campus, what that does in terms of transportation, in terms of activities. We did feel that there might be some space in the central office building that might be repurposed for other uses, so exploring that.
So that gives everybody some food for thought, I think. So I don't mean to harp on this time frame, but we do want to make sure that we're clear. What I'm hearing from the group is no meeting on March 29th. February 29th, thank you. Yeah, you won't have a meeting on March 29th either. So February 29th, that meeting, when this group gets back together, will be March 3rd. And at that meeting, I think we're looking for 2 things. One is recommendations from the group on some of these short-term decisions that need to be made. And those are, what do we do with 6th and maybe 7th grade at Hall Fletcher? Again, these are recommendations. Preschool, what do we do there? Do we add kindergarten? Do we expand to 1st grade? What do we do there? And Montfort campus, is the vision big kids or little kids? And that will give us some direction that we need to make these decisions that need to be made for our staff and our families. Hopefully we can do that in a reasonable amount of time, and then the focus would be on the bigger picture at that meeting of you know, what are the next steps to give us, to guide us down this road of what is this bigger picture for the district?
So we're going back and getting input from our stakeholders on those 3 items.
Yeah, and the bigger picture.
Pre-K classrooms in Dixon and Jones next year.
Okay, thank you, Polly. Yeah.
Are we going to have, just for clarity, people are going to be able to say Hall Fletcher is going to present kind of their best findings as well before we're actually discussing pros and cons of this, right?
I don't see why we could come up with pros and cons as we do it. I mean, is that too far?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, if we can do both, if we can cover these 4 issues and this group can come to a consensus and make a recommendation on those, and then look at this bigger picture of what other feedback have you gained that looks longer down the road and gives us a bigger vision for the district. And we can then look at this picture about where we are.
Is there a way that we should capture this information so that we can all have access to it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure it's available and you guys want to bring down where it's looking for the information so that way we have access to what we're doing.
Charlie?
And we'll also keep it on the restructuring revenue side. You know, that's for the general folks. This is not stuff we're trying to keep from our other stakeholders, right? So put it both places, internally for Google Docs, and externally on the restructuring webpage.
Right, so the parents in the room wouldn't have access to Google Docs, so we need to be clear. And do we know who all is in the room and have their emails, so we can email them and say it's been posted on the website or it's on Google Docs? Okay. Okay.
I don't want to open another can of worms, but as far as year-round versus balanced calendar and how that plays into restructuring, we should get feedback from, especially the school that knows the best about that. Because I do think if we do alternative middle school options, that's got to be explored, if that's going to continue or not, if that should be something we should talk about at other schools. And then I don't want to forget what Erica said about the registration and how parents are pretty hesitant probably to enroll right now because they don't know what's going to happen with Hall Fletcher. A solution you said would just be to extend the application process.
There have just been a lot of parents who have expressed that they don't want to put their kid at Hall Fletcher and get yanked out, so they're looking at other options. So that it doesn't make us so good.
And it doesn't help fully enroll you all so that you're shifting numbers from other buildings.
And can I just, and Dr. Baldwin, I want to, just reiterate, the board is who's deciding it, and I'm wondering if you can, Dr. Baldwin, just share a little bit about funds, because a lot of people are proposing this alternative use of the Montford campus. I like the idea of an alternative school there, and I'm thinking that where I'm coming from is there's a lot more funding available, it's a way to use that building that doesn't cost the district. Is there any more information we have on that so that when we prepare what we're proposing, or to come up with a rebuttal for somebody proposing that? And it could be not immediately, but in the next week or so, if you can just maybe elaborate a little bit on what you mean with that about funds.
I'll just kind of, in summary, and I can't be real specific because some of the things are in conversations with partnerships that haven't spoken with their boards.
Right.
So I don't want to create an issue, but there are grant opportunities that we've already been in conversation with those industries that could help us. There are also opportunities for any kind of non-traditional high school setting, just by the nature of what that could do for children. And so, other than to share that information, I will tell you that there are some community partners, businesses, that are very interested in partnering with us, as well as our institutes of higher education, ABTech and UNC Asheville, that would also help us in funding because of the bond that's currently sitting on the table. So that is about all I can say about specific conversations. But yes. And so for us, the funding although it's still going to be funding that will impact Asheville City Schools, that is a resource that we know we have that we wouldn't have in other opportunities.
Is it just for high school or middle school grants and options?
It's 9-12 right now. I'm not saying there aren't any middle school options, we just haven't discovered them yet.
How many people are you trying to serve in an alternative high school right now? I hear there's a need to have an alternative high school, like immediately, because of how they can't all be on the Asheville High School campus. How many people are we trying to fit a school for right now?
For the 17-18 school year, is that what you're asking, or for the current students that are being served in alternative?
How about the current school year right now?
Okay, the current students that are being served right now are about 24, 25 students, but that's an alternative program. We're talking about a career academy, completely different concept. Completely could be some of the students that are served currently in alternative, but there are also a whole other group of students that could be served in that capacity to leave and be certified in a career path. To
like
leave and
have track?
Yes, could be, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. With actual internships and partnerships with job opportunities walking out the door.
Which we do now, but it would be an expanded program for kids that, you know, don't want all the other stuff. It could be more tailored to their needs. We do that. We do have kids leave the high school now with license in cosmetology,
correct,
CNA licenses, and all that. But we could do it more directly and more effectively.
More children.
Yeah, with more children. I would say you probably get 100 to 150 in the long run on that.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a logistical question. Tomorrow, our school improvement team will meet. So this will be our first opportunity to present a lot of this information to them. Is there any way that this information can be available by the end of the day tomorrow? Is that possible?
You're talking about what's on the board?
Yes. I mean, because I know that came up.
Sure.
Like,
I mean, that'll be
our
easy.
teachers knew that we were coming to meet and they want information. And I know tomorrow they will ask those questions, like what are some of the other options that came out of the meeting. I just want to be able to have this information available so that we can share it.
Is Isaac Dixon outfitted for a K, I mean a pre-K to K, the new one?
We weren't originally, but I think they've found spaces.
Today there was a group that went to look at the new building to see if one of those classrooms can be outfitted for a preschool classroom. So that
it is a flexible situation.
Yes, that's been in conversation for a while.
And if still serve Hall Fletcher, if you guys come up with proposals prior to March 3rd, is there any way you could push them out to all of us so we can start talking about them?
The only thing that I think we are in agreement right now is that next year, do not add or take away grade levels.
So so pre-K.
Don't add 7, don't change us for next year. We would keep you just at 6.
Still at 6 if you want us to get 6.
You want to go to 7? We don't have the resources for it. It'll take a lot of money to do 7. So you'll be K through 6. That's what y'all want. Keep us the same for
Okay.
No, we're pre-K. We have
Pre-K.
pre-K. Pre-K.
Yeah,
We decided to add a whole bunch of other.
Oh,
yeah.
And give you a new strong position.
Yes.
And before the next meeting, I would appreciate all of the powerful thought out there about if there were a very small elementary school that is housed in the preschool building, you know, on one hallway, you know, thinking 1 or 2 classrooms per grade level, like a Silsa Junior or something. What would we want that school to be like? How could you make it a valuable addition to the community? I would love to have more brains thinking that one around in their heads.
Again, we appreciate your time tonight. We appreciate your input and the work you're getting ready to do with your stakeholders. And we will see you back here March the 3rd at, did we set a time? 4? All right, 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock, March 3rd in this very spot. Thank you so much.
We're taking notes. We might have to do this again. Don't be stealing my stuff.
I know.